This Ben Joravsky Show post-debate Benny J bonus interview is brought to you in part by the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local 126 and District 8, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 9, the International Union of Operating Engineers, Local 150, and of course, our good friends at the Chicago Federation of Labor. Benny J, take it away.
Okay, will do. Dr. D, Ben Joravsky here. It's bonus time on the Ben Joravsky Show. We've been promoting this bonus segment for all day, all day beating Friday, September 13th. Dr. D said, let's put it on live, so we're on YouTube Live, right, D?
That's correct.
That is correct. Thank you, Robert Mueller. And but a lot of people will be listening to this as download, so we're going to probably be uploading this, so it hits 6 a.m. Monday. So anyway.
5 a.m. Monday. There's a lot of early risers out there now. Come on.
I'm not one of them, that's for certain. We have two of the greatest political minds Chicago has in the studio. I love these people to death. And so it's like my dream team of political observers in the studio with me. Can't wait to get the conversation going as we do it. With our bonus segments, I asked the Dream Team members to introduce themselves. So I'll start with Dream Team member right over here.
Okay. Hi, Ben. Great to be back. Good to see you, Dr. D. Great to be here on the bonus show. Sameena, Mustafa here. Ben was gracious enough to have me on when I ran for Congress in the 2018 cycle, and now I'm just someone who hangs out here every couple of weeks. That's what I do.
She's a regular on the Ben Joravsky show.
And I have a lot of opinions about Democratic presidential candidates.
And we're going to hear them. I've already heard a bit of them on the phone before the show, and I kept telling Sameena, save it for the show. All right, and Dream Team guest number 2, right there. Introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Litesa Wallace, former state representative for the 67th District, former progressive candidate for lieutenant governor, current stuffy nose person, but I have lots of opinions as well about last night's debate.
And I want to thank Litesa, first of all, for coming all the way from Rockford for the show. But secondly, she's sick, and she is a real trooper. She said she was going to do it. She got sick, and she came down anyway. Thank you, Litesa
Thank you
Wallace.
for having me.
And so anyway, yes, Litesa Wallace, Litesa Wallace, state representative from Rockford, former state representative, and she ran for lieutenant governor with Daniel Biss in the 2018 primary. And that Biss, I've been being reamed by Pritzker supporters ever since. I, yes, indeed, voted for Biss Wallace.
And we appreciate it.
Although I always thought it should have been the other way around, Wallace Biss. Whatever, that's all ancient history.
That's another show.
That's another show. It's another show.
And hey, what we're doing a post-debate show here. So if you're listening on the live stream, on the Facebook live stream, or the YouTube live stream, I'm looking at the chat. So if you want to weigh in with something, send it. We'll get it on the air.
All right. So we've been talking all day about the debates. I listened to them, and I know both of you did as well. Let's just start with just a general observation before I have a list of specific points to go through. And if Dennis can find them, we'll play some bits from the debate so we can get your response to them. But we'll start with you, Sameena, just a general observation about the debate, what it means in terms of the campaign, et cetera.
So I think all of these debates, it's more theater than real substance. But you saw some standout performances, and there's a lot of chatter about what the impact of those performances are on their campaigns. I actually think that Castro did well. I thought Beto did well. They had some standout performances. Klobuchar talked a lot more than she has in past debate performances. Overall, I'd say nobody hit it out of the park, but there were some real missteps, and most of them came from the presumptive frontrunner, Joe Biden.
Okay, missteps. I don't know. I think those are Biden steps. You know what I'm saying? I think that's just kind of the way he steps.
I think he just changed his name to Miss, and then that'll be missteps.
Yeah. Misstep, not Mr. Step. Misstep.
I don't know what she's talking about.
Make sure the television, make sure you have the record player on at night. The phone, make sure the kids hear words.
All right, that's Joe Biden could be the Democratic nominee. Get used to it, folks. Litesa, your general thoughts.
You know, I have to agree with the idea of it being very much like theater. I do think there were some really kind of great standout lines. I think Harris had a couple of lines that were direct and resonated with people. I liked how she looked directly in the camera and talked to the current president.
Oh, Donnie Trump. Yeah.
Excuse me. I also think that there were some questions that I wanted to hear answers from particular candidates that we didn't get to hear from them. When we started to talk about civil rights and the racial divide in the community and in the country, we didn't hear from Warren, we didn't hear from Sanders or Yang on those issues. I thought that was a bit disappointing. I did believe that Castro was really strong. I know that he got a lot of criticism at the end, but I thought he was very strong. And it was actually pretty good to hear more from Senator Amy. as sometimes she's called.
Well, Castro, I don't know. The only criticism he got that I know about it from former Mayor Rahm Emanuel, and as far as I'm concerned, if Mayor Rahm criticizes, you must have done something right. Now, having said that, we're going to start with Castro. This covers a couple bases. So, is it permissible for a younger candidate to criticize an older candidate for being old, for drawing attention to a person's age? Is that permissible in this day and age, or is that ageism, Sameena?
So first of all, if you're talking specifically about what Castro said to Biden, I do not consider it an ageist attack. It was substantive. Do you remember what you just said? You just said X, and now you're denying you said X. So it wasn't about ageism. It was about what did you say? Will you stand by what you said? I think that I think these criticisms are getting collapsed. I think there's something to be said, and it's a fine line to navigate. But there's something to be said, and I think Eric Swalwell did kind of a clumsy job of it too. But just saying like, hey, we don't have a bench in the Democratic Party. There is no pipeline of leadership in the caucus, in the House, in terms of who's the up and coming leaders in the party. And so I think it's fair to say there's an opportunity for a new leadership and not have it be about age. Because frankly, a lot of the new ideas have come from Bernie, and he's no spring chicken. So let's be clear. Like, people aren't making that, sometimes they do say old white men and they lump Biden and Bernie together. But Biden is still talking like the same guy he was 40 years ago, in a bad way. Yeah. Right. Bernie has been saying some good things for 40 plus years, and he's been ahead of the curve. So let's be clear about what the criticism is. And so that's where I think it's the attack on, and I have to say, if you look at this, and I don't know how much time you spent on Black Twitter, Ben, but if you read Black Twitter, they've connected the dots. Who gets attacked for attacking Biden? Kamala Harris, Cory Booker, Julian Castro. Mm-hmm. It's the candidates of color.
I have to make a confession. No, I don't spend any time on Black Twitter. I don't spend any time on Twitter.
Yeah, you're not on white Twitter.
White Twitter, green Twitter. Your thoughts?
That is a perfect observation. I mean, because Bernie kind of ripped him apart last night as well. But we only heard about Castro. It was a very substantive point. In one segment, when they talked about healthcare, Biden did say, you can buy into. He used that phrase. Mm-hmm. I guess there was another portion where he did kind of say you would be automatically included. But what Castro was speaking to was the fact that he did at one point mention buying into it. And so I don't think that was an ageist attack. It was saying, how is what you're saying now different from what you literally said 2 minutes ago? Mm-hmm.
Well, I could tell you this, that the audience disagreed with you guys, because in the immediate aftermath of Castro saying, did you forget it already, or whatever the line was that he gave, there was a gasp from the audience, and so they felt as though a line had been crossed in what is acceptable. Now, listen, Castro also said it's a primary, it's rough and tumble, and so... And
he said it to the youngest candidate on the stage, by the way. He said it to Buttigieg. So we're talking about mindset, not age.
Equal opportunity with his with his jabs last night.
Listen, as the old guy in almost any conversation I have on this show, which I generally am the old guy in a conversation, I am used to people making fun of me for being old, so I can handle it. But I do think, put it this way, a lot of people who vote in primaries are the older persuasion. So I'm just thinking tactically, whether or not it's fair, whether or not it's acceptable for a primary, tactically, I don't know if it's the best thing for Castro to do. Do you follow what I just said?
I think it's a fair assessment. That's why I think it has to be, and again, I don't think that Castro went there in an ageist, I didn't consider it an ageist attack. I considered it a Biden not paying attention to what he's saying and not really being prepared to be on that stage for the third time in a row. So
That's true.
He's been consistently bad on debates. He's had the exact same sort of energy, sort of fumbling and mumbling, and sometimes, frankly, grateful that his time is up because it's, I'm done. And he stops.
Yeah.
He stops even before. Nobody does that.
Yeah.
So he clearly needs to be saved. His staff needs to be paying attention to every single one of these tapes and coaching him because if he is the nominee, if he is going toe-to-toe with Donald Trump is not a genius, but he knows how, he's a boxer.
And he knows
how to
rumble
land those
people.
punches.
Yes. Yep.
Donald Trump's a boxer?
No,
That's
in
the
the sense-
flabbiest boxer I've ever seen.
No. He's in the sense that he's a bully. He's a fighter.
He could do a counter punch, is what you're saying.
All he does is punches. All he does
Until
is
he
punches and
gets
counter
one.
punches.
Until he lands one.
Yeah, exactly. And it would be easy with Biden based on what we're seeing.
All right, I'll throw this out to you and get your response to this. I would equate, then we'll move on from this point. I do not believe Castro is as innocent as you guys are saying he is. I equate it to that moment in the mayoral debate where the candidate was Tony Preckwinkle versus Lori Lightfoot. And they were at, well, what do you really like about the other candidate? And of all the things in the world nice to say about Tony Preckwinkle, to say about Lori Lightfoot, all the things you could think about, she worked her way up, she's a corporate lawyer, this, that, and the other thing. What did Tony Preckwinkle say? Well, I really like the fact that she's out about being a lesbian. By the way, did you know she was a lesbian?
But
Yeah.
that
So,
was a
come on.
specific dog whistle. Come on. That
Yeah.
was very intentional. I guess you could say that Castro was playing to the older, maybe he's not remembering what he said because he's older. Excuse me. But he also really did backtrack on what he said. So should he have not called it out? Or, what's the solution to that?
Yeah. I can hear what you're saying, Ben, in the sense that a primary voter is typically older, and that to me is a separate structural
That's
problem.
a whole other issue. Yeah.
Because we have a lot of folks who just aren't engaged in the process. So in that sense, if you heard that, I will say that, not to go down this path, but 538 released their post-debate poll, and Elizabeth Warren by far and away won that. So it's like, everyone's sort of like congratulating Biden for a job well done. It's like, the proof is in the pudding, as it were. So as far as Castro and some of the other candidates, this was their third attempt, if they had been on a debate stage before, to make a lane for themselves, right? And some of them haven't done that. They haven't broken through to the top three. And right now, it's pretty much a Warren, Sanders, Biden, with a couple other folks sort of playing a role. But it's really the three that were in the center. So how do those other folks stand out? They have to say or do something.
Yeah.
I bet Castro, people know who Castro is now.
Yeah.
Whether it's good or bad, he's getting some attention.
Yeah, and I remember that Bill de Blasio, remember that name? He was in the debates, the last debates, yelling, trying to make his name presence known, yelling. All right, you mentioned Elizabeth Warren. We're moving all over the place. You have a whole list of things to talk about. And I addressed this to you guys before we went on the air, and I got to deal with this. I don't know how else to say it, but for lack of a better phrase, I call it self-hating women. I've been drinking the Elizabeth Warren Kool-Aid for a long time. Right now, I tell this all the time, I'm wavering between Bernie and Elizabeth. I don't know which one at the moment that I'm going to vote for. I love Elizabeth Warren. She's been the front lines. She's a role model in so many ways, in my opinion, for what a Democratic politician of any gender is. So many women have told me, yeah, I like her policies, but she's schoolmarmish. I don't like the way she talks. And when I hear that, I'm like, what is that all about? And I don't know. Let's just get it out here. Do you guys hear similar criticism from women talking about Elizabeth Warren in sort of a negative, derogatory way? Do you hear that kind of criticism?
I think we hear that often whenever there's a woman who is seeking true power and true leadership. Think about it. Who are the disciplinarians? Who are the educators? Who are the caretakers? It's other women. And if you've had some negative archetypes along the way, and then you see someone who maybe says or does something that reminds you of that, it can, immediately take you there. I think that is just a symptom of the sexism that we have, right? We haven't seen women in those type of positions, and so we're very quick to dismiss and say she's too much like the school teacher that I had that I hated in 6th grade, right? Or she's so much like my mom, I can't stand it. We see that and we hear that from men as well. So I think that a lot of that goes back to the fact that women have the most touch, if you will, in our lives, across our lifetime. And we have not seen then women outside of those type of roles, and we will assign that to someone who's seeking higher office or any level of leadership. You hear and see it in corporate America as well. In higher education, female professors are expected to be the ones to, be the sponsors of the student organizations and help with everyone's research project and stay after and support all of these things and not focus on her own research. But when she does focus on her own research, then she's cold and aloof and she's not, playing nice with everyone. So I think we do that to women across the spectrum.
Yeah, I'd say there's the phenomenon, and Litesa and I have talked about this, the whole who the F do you think you are? Like, who does she think she is? Mm-hmm. She's uppity. So, I mean, Kamala's getting that, I don't really hear it very much about Elizabeth Warren per se. What I hear mostly is because I'm seeing the Bernie Warren divide more than anything is more, Elizabeth Warren is perceived as more acceptable to the establishment. But again, and there's a lot of lumping her with Hillary. So in that sense, I see it as a sexist attack, as like, oh, she's an older white woman, therefore she must be exactly like Hillary. It's like, no, there's some differences. Right. There's some differences. And so that's where I think there are some folks who are just kind of putting them together, but I don't necessarily see it like the school marm critique. But I have seen attacks that I perceive as gendered towards Kamala Harris and Elizabeth Warren, just in general, in terms of how they're covered, frankly, or if they're covered.
What do you mean?
Absolutely.
Well, just, so much of, I can't remember where the headline was, but I think it was something like two front runners headed for showdown on, debate night. It's like there's 10 people on the stage, not just 2. So there's this, ignorance of anybody else besides say Bernie and Biden. And I think, the polls, it's early, we have a couple of months. But again, I still think, with someone like Kamala Harris, Elizabeth Warren, these are women, and something that people have brought up many times about the candidates, and Klobuchar is included in this, these are women who are senators who frankly have won every election. They've sort of gone to from winning elections. So all this can they win? Should they win? But then something I said to you on the phone, Ben, which is, you go back to 2016, and frankly, I every time I come on your show, I say this, a majority of white voters have always voted, since the Voting Rights Act, have voted for the Republican candidate. And I am going to be shocked if that isn't the case in 2020, because a majority of white voters have always voted for the other candidate. So, and that includes white women, as they did in 2016. So what that does to the primary vote, I think that creates a lane, frankly, for Joe Biden.
Unfortunately.
All right. Dee, do you have that Rahm quote about, I keep referring to this, where he talked about exciting the base. The base is already excited. Do you know that one I'm talking about? Because this plays just into what Sameena just got finished saying. He's looking for it right now. We've had this debate. It's an age-old debate on this show. Litesa, people come on how can the Democrats beat Donald Trump? Do you have it?
I think so. He's speaking with Yvette Simpson.
Yes.
Thank you.
Here we go.
Oh, Democracy for America.
Progressives are really where the energy is right now. And I think if you can expand the electorate, which is what we saw in 2008, bringing out new voters, particularly brown and black voters, young voters, energize the base where you don't have to change your message much, right? Just go out and get those voters excited. We can win.
Hold on, Rahm. I saw you shaking your head real quick. What's the rebuttal here?
Well, first of all, Donald Trump is going to do a great job turning out our vote. And in 2008, as well as in 92, 96, and in 12, is because both Bill Clinton and Barack Obama brought other people, not just people in the party, other people to the party.
All right, that's Rahm Emanuel. He goes on for a little. We cut him off. It's mercifully. So that gets to the heart of things. What Yvette Simpson was saying, that you have to give people who are Democrats a reason to vote, or people who lean Democrat a reason to vote, so they sign up to vote, they come out to vote, and they believe in a candidate, and Rahm dismisses that. They're going to vote anyway. We got them locked in. We don't have to worry about them. We got to bring other people to vote Democrat. That means people who voted for Donald Trump last time are going to have to flip. So we have to have policies that move right to bring them over. I hear this. It just drives me crazy. It's the same old Democratic strategy of the Clinton era that lost 20. Say that again. Are you talking about the governor's race? Is that what you're talking about?
No.
So what do you think about that strategy, Rahm's strategy there?
It's a terrible strategy. I mean, people, we can look at what this current president is doing and we can be up in arms, because we should be. It's awful on many levels for many segments of our country. But at the end of the day, when I go back to certain parts of Rockford, or I travel to parts of Chicago that I grew up in, or even in the south suburbs, the day-to-day lives of many, many people wasn't any better or any different, depending upon whoever is in the White House or whoever is in the governor's mansion. So unless you're talking about how are you going to change their fundamental well-being, right? Are you going to help them find a living wage job? Are you creating opportunities for safe schools and safe neighborhoods? People want to know that. It's unfortunate, but until things start to knock on your own door, you don't really think about, children who are stuck at the border. You don't think about it unless that child is somehow connected to you. It's unfortunate you don't think about the Bahamian individuals who can't get into the country because you don't have family that's doing that. But what you are thinking about is every day I get up, I go to work, I work 40, 50 hours a week, and I still can't seem to get ahead. And that hasn't changed no matter who is in whatever office. And until we start to really speak to that, which is why I think so many young people are continuing to rock with or roll with Bernie, because he speaks about those economic issues, and to a certain extent, those are social justice issues. If we're not really speaking to people where they're at, no, people are not just automatically going to come out and vote, because for all they know, we've had Democratic mayors, we've had Democratic governors, we've had Democratic presidents, and my day-to-day life hasn't changed.
Yeah, I think there's, Yvette Simpson's from Democracy for America, which is, really kind of the counter to the centrist wing, which, Rahm represents. Rahm is operating assuming that all of those votes are sort of accounted for. He is not thinking about expanding the electorate at all on the Democratic side. He's saying we got these folks, we're going to get them. We need to get those 5 swing voters in Ohio that Democratic strategists and centrists like Rahm are obsessed with. Guess what? We're not going to win Ohio, and we're not going to get those swing voters. What you need to do is, if you were, which, people in 08 and 12 realized, is you needed to go to Milwaukee and Detroit and some of these communities that have been ignored and are probably not unlike the parts of Rockford that Litesa was talking about that have been ignored and felt neglected. Now, when you talk to those people in 2016, and someone did a story on Milwaukee, black voters in Milwaukee in 2016, they said nothing changed in the 8 years that Obama was in office. What was the point for me to come out and vote? So this is what I think Rahm and people like him miss every single time, is that the base is actually not fully realized. Hasn't been fully, sort of franchised, if that's the right way to say it. We have what was the percentage of turnout for the municipal election? Was it 33%? That's not a mandate.
Right.
That is not a mandate. Do you see what I'm saying?
I know exactly what you're saying.
So I'm saying we had, 14 people running for mayor. Lori Lightfoot's being told that she has a mandate. She didn't. And we haven't gotten, almost 46% of the country didn't vote in the 2016 election. There are people who don't feel like the candidates are speaking to them. Nobody is entitled to a vote.
Yeah.
Hillary Clinton wasn't entitled to their vote. But here's what I will say. You're right. And one thing that Rahm is right about is Donald Trump is going to excite his base. And there was an article, and I wish I had thought to send it to you, but there was a pretty good article from an organizer from Obama's team saying the Republicans are paying attention to what we did in 2008. You know why? Because they're doing them. They're reading the books about what we did in 2008, and they're using all of our tactics. I wish the Democrats would use our tactics.
Like what?
Wouldn't that be amazing?
Wait, what tactics are you talking about?
So basically, the field.
Yes.
You need
Contact.
to have in the age of social media, in the age of really kind of fragmented media, whether it's in print, broadcast, or streaming like this. People are still persuaded by one-to-one conversations. Yes. It is hard to tell people like, oh, someone came to my door and handed me this card for this candidate, and that I was really impressed. People, that really touches folks. And I think even in this age of tweets and impressions and Instagram, people still want to know that someone shows up. It still makes a difference.
All right, well, Litesa, let me ask you.
The science is clear on that as well.
Let me follow up on what you said. Something it was very profound. You were talking about how folks voted for Barack Obama in 2008, and here we are in 2019, and nothing really has changed in a fundamental, systematic way. All the inequities that existed when Barack Obama was elected in 2008, all the inequities that existed for years before that,
right,
still very much exist. So there's just this underlying, what's the word? Nihilism. I don't know what else to think. Like, it's just a purposelessness of
What's
it
the
all.
point?
And guess what?
Yeah.
Racism, sexism, xenophobia all existed before Donald Trump.
Right.
It'll all go on after Donald Trump. So, it's very much saying to people, oh, look, and please, I hope no one takes this as me being like a supporter of this man. In no way am I. But when you are so busy painting one party or one individual as the boogeyman, you're ignoring all of the things that created the boogeyman. And then you come and say, oh, well, we're less like that boogeyman, but we're still not going to talk about all the things that created that boogeyman. That is a fundamental problem within the Democratic Party. From top to bottom, state and national, that is a problem. And that is why people are not turning out. People are not excited because nothing has changed in terms of, again, those disparities. And it's unfair for us to even think that one black person who is also part of that system of having had met racism and having met all types of other forms of discrimination or oppression, it's unfair for us to say that he should have been able to change all of those things in the 8 years that he was in office. And I'll venture to say that we're going to look back in a few years at Mayor Lightfoot, and we're going to try to put a whole bunch on her shoulders that she wouldn't have been able to change.
Oh, I can tell you.
And ignoring the fact that it was 32 years between elected black mayors.
I'm the only guy in this room old enough, speaking of my age, now I'm playing my age card on you, lived through the Harold Washington years, and when Chicago had a lot of crime, and you guys weren't even in grammar school back then.
What, Harold Washington?
I was 16 when he died.
I can remember.
I was 60 when he died.
I won't
lying.
even say. She just looks she looks amazing.
Wait, how old did you say?
I don't want to get into how great
let's move on.
female candidates look.
The point is, I remember the Tribune writing editorials. Hey, Harold, stop talking about reform, this, that, and the other thing, whatever. And what about all the crime? in in the black neighborhoods? What about all the crime? Daley gets elected, people are still getting shot all over. Well, crime, it's beyond any one mayor's control. Oh my God, wasn't that way for Harold? So you're right. There's definitely a double standard. Oh, by the way, one more point, following up what you said about Rahm and the base. The reason Rahm got reelected is because the base wasn't energized. If black people turned out and were voting their economic interests in the 2015 election, there's no way Rahm Emanuel would have been reelected. This is my humble opinion. You guys can feel free to disagree with me.
The strategy is never really to turn out the vote.
It's to depress the vote.
Yes. But let's also be clear, and we talked about this separately, which is whenever an election happens, it has to do with the candidates, the opponents. It has to do with sort of other conditions that are outside of the campaigns and the candidates, and also the operation that they're running. You know, it's hard to really. I'd say there might be some parallels between the 2015 race between Chewy and Rahm and 2016 between Clinton and Trump, in the sense that what was the operation that Chewy was running that could have countered Rahm's money, and he's not stupid. We don't agree with him, but he's not stupid, and he doesn't have stupid people on his team. But could Chewy's team have done some things better? Could Clinton's team have done some things better? So this is, hindsight is 2020. Yes. But let's be clear. Field was something that was a failure from the Clinton team, and people. I don't know if the DNC has learned that lesson. The media certainly hasn't learned that lesson. So now the question is, will the candidate who is a nominee, will their team, at least learn from that and do something differently?
All right, let's. Litesa, you mentioned Bernie Sanders. Do you have the bit where Bernie was talking about? He talked about healthcare many times. One of his ringing. Now pronouncements on our healthcare system. Anyone?
I'm looking for it. Go ahead and talk.
All
stall,
right.
And I'll find it.
Okay, well, I'll stall. I've heard Bernie Sanders so many times that I could pretty much do Bernie. I'm sure.
Do Bernie. Yeah. Do Bernie.
We can't hear a little bit.
Bernie.
Do it.
$27. That's me imitating Dennis, imitating Bernie.
That was good.
We should do a Bernie Sanders competition on the air.
No, he'll win it.
He is so much fun. Like he is.
All right, let's hear you do Bernie.
Okay. Wait. Okay. Let's. What should I be talking about? Should I talk about healthcare?
Use the words 10%. Do that.
10%.
There you go.
10%. There's 500,000 people who have filed bankruptcy because of health care. That's my best.
All right, that's pretty good.
That's actually Larry David, but
yeah,
that's okay.
I was going to say. Now, Litesa, let's hear your Bernie.
I can't.
You're not going to do it. She's got a cold.
The savings and the benefits.
Actually, you would be perfect because Bernie had a cold last night. You have a cold now.
Yes.
Oh, is that what Bernie had a cold last night?
Yeah.
You couldn't tell me.
No, I just thought he was raspy.
Yeah. It was just,
I'm the only person on this stage that hasn't voted for any of Trump's military budgets.
That's right.
I like it.
Sameena, Mustafa. Can you do Frank Sinatra? By the way, whenever you guys do Bernie, I'm just going to say this, you kind of slide into Marlon Brando from The Godfather, whether you're realizing or not.
You have to kind of go there.
You kind of end up doing Marlon Brando. You got it, D?
I'm sorry. I was having fun with you guys.
Yeah. Anyway, okay, I've heard Bernie so many times, and it fires me up when he talks about the fact that you cannot possibly think you're going to have a sane system of healthcare if you have the insurance companies in there getting a profit. It is so obvious. It makes so much sense. It's so logical. Right. But he has to say it over and over again because the other guys keep saying, "Oh, why? You should
have your option, right?"
Yeah, you should have your option. They think Americans are really dumb. Which, anyway. So, how effective, Litesa Wallace, do you think it is when Bernie makes these pronouncements, these really strong, powerful statements over and over again? Do you think at some point people stop listening? Do you think it's sinking in? What's your thoughts about this?
Well, what is it? There actually is some number. I can't even remember how many times people have to hear something before it really sticks. What is it, like 7 at least? I don't know. He might just be falling into that same trap that we were talking about with women. Like, people are probably like, oh, okay, that's the angry uncle or the grandpa who knows it all, yet we don't know we haven't seen what he's talking about. We haven't lived it. We haven't experienced it. So whatever. Unfortunately, I think sometimes he comes off as that. But if people take the time and listen, I mean, the man is, I don't know, he's a visionary. He's been, as Sameena mentioned earlier, speaking and doing and acting on so much of this for decades. And maybe now we're just now willing to kind of open up our ears a little bit to hear part of it. Obviously, I would say, because people keep saying Medicare for all, but they're not really proposing Medicare for all, but because they've heard Bernie say it so much, they're like, oh, well, we're going to say we have Medicare for all and this other option where you can, then that's not Medicare for all. Yeah. But, you know, apparently people are listening because they're using phrases that he's been using for many, many years.
I would also add that I think it's really interesting to see what's happened in the last 18 to 24 months on some of these issues. There have been other folks that have been echoing what has been said by Bernie, by Elizabeth Warren, by other progressives that have been doing this for many years, but they have a different audience, and I'm thinking specifically of the Squad, and even people like Cardi B. I mean, like, there are people who are doing the work of expanding the electorate and expanding the audience for these issues and doing it in a way that's captivating folks. I think, honestly, had there not been the powerful winds of AOC, Rashida Tlaib, Ayanna Pressley, and Ilhan Omar, like, they are bringing these issues to a new audience, and they're going to say it a little bit differently because they're different from Bernie and Elizabeth Warren and some of these other progressives like Pramila Jayapal, Barbara Lee, all these folks who have been doing it. But I think they're creating, they're crafting the message in a way that's uniquely, with their style. So I think that's also helping some of these issues. If you've seen a dramatic increase. I mean, I've seen it not only at the electorate level, but at the institutional level. Last time I was on, I think we talked about the American Medical Association sort of pulling back from their opposition. So you're seeing really a sea change. And so, yeah, sometimes you can be too early and say something over and over again, and then somebody else says the same thing. Listen, any woman who's ever worked in any institution has been there. Yes. You have said something in a meeting, and then some guy said it, and you're like, wait, I just said that. Exactly. We have been there, yes. Okay? So that happens all the time. So unfortunately, it's happening, in this case, to Bernie.
And that's also kind of how I feel about Elizabeth Warren. I feel like I love what she's put forward, but it doesn't sound markedly different from any of the things that I fought for in the House. It's not markedly different than anything that I would have imagined my great-grandmother saying she needed. That she would have needed a living wage. She would have needed access to child care. She would have needed housing that's adequate and quality and not be discriminated against as she sought it. So, yes, so many of these things, I would venture to say, people of color have been really fighting for a very, very long time. And now we've gotten to a point where it's being packaged and it has been mainstreamed by individuals who have perceived privilege. And, I mean, we know that that's often how it happens.
What do you mean?
But I can't
Explain
even
that more,
imagine
being
that.
packaged and presented. What do you mean by that?
I mean, when you're talking about universal child care, as a Black woman, as a woman of African descent, a woman whose family has been in this country for many, many, many years, working outside of the home was never an option. I mean, it was never, optional to stay home, I should say. Yeah. It was not an option to do that. The film The Help was so huge a few years ago, and I took my mother to see it. And we both were in tears because we thought about my grandmother and how that was her life. She left her children, my mom and her sister, at home to travel to the north side to take care of other people's children. So these are not new issues. Women of color have been fighting for these things for a very long time. The fact that our federal labor practices, left out domestics like my grandmother. These are all economic, racial, and gender issues that certainly Black women and women of color have been fighting for a very long time. But when it's said by a white man or a white woman, it is heard by the masses.
I could tell you I share, I know exactly what you guys are talking about. If you're on the fringe ideologically in this country, I'm speaking of my career here, but if you're on the fringe ideologically and you're pushing in a direction that nobody else is going, the first thing they do is ignore you. Okay, that's the first thing they do is they ignore you. And at some point, if you're persistent enough, they try to co-opt you. And if that doesn't work, they co-opt your worldview, but they take they strip it down so it's meaningless.
Well,
and,
how can we keep throwing around the word progressive? What the hell does that even mean anymore? What does it mean anymore?
I do not know the answer to that question. Do you have an answer to that question?
No, but that's something that I hear all the time. And I think Litesa nails it. She nails it. These are ideas that have probably, if you really did sort of the lineage, the history of these ideas, they started from activists, in most cases, Black women. Yeah. But you look on this debate stage last night, and for the first time, you've got a Black woman candidate, and for the first time on the moderator's desk, you've got a Black woman. And that was a fight.
It was a fight to get her there. Is that what you're saying? I didn't know the behind the scenes.
The last two debates were, there wasn't. There might. I think I can't remember. There was a man of color, but there was never a woman of color.
All right, let's get to the woman of color on the stage, both as a candidate and the woman of color on stage as a moderator. And there was a great moment in the debate last night where Kamala Harris was confronted. Do you have that bit? Even if you don't have it,
I don't think I do. I'm just gonna say a universal no. I'm like doing three things at once.
Poor guy,
running the camera, posting the weekend show.
Poor D, man.
No, he's working. He's working it.
He's multi-talented. So let's just forget that. I could just, I know it. I've heard it so many times. And this is that moment where Kamala Harris was forced to come face to face with the fact that when she was Attorney General in the state of California, most powerful law enforcement official in the state of California, she was not a progressive on issues like legalized marijuana, on issues like bail and bond reform that are the big talking points of the day. She was kind of a hard ass.
Tough on crime.
Tough on crime, law and order, cut from the Bill Clinton school. And now she's being forced to confront her record while she is a candidate trying to present herself as a progressive. And the person who put it right into her face was the moderator, whose name I cannot remember.
Lindsay Davis.
And that was a very powerful moment. I would love to get your thoughts on both how the question is framed and the response that was delivered. And I'll just start with you, Sameena.
So I think it was really powerful for a number of reasons. The moderator, Lindsay Davis, was asking the question. The first time there's a Black woman in this debate cycle who's moderating a debate. You're at a historically Black college, and you're asking Kamala Harris this question. And there's a part of me that was like, okay, yes, Kamala Harris should be accountable for her record. But there was also a part of me is like, ask Joe Biden, ask all these other people. Like, I think it's important to ask these questions, but I also feel like it is unfortunate that the issues of race and criminal justice are always lumped together. That's one.
Yes.
Two, the fact that issues of racism as they are impacting other systems and institutions are always left to the people of color to not only ask but also answer. Mm-hmm. So you've got this loop, like only people of color ask other people of color about issues that affect people of color. Guess what? Beto can answer that question. Biden can answer that question. Buttigieg can answer that question. Klobuchar can answer that question. So it's and Sanders and Warren, obviously, which they weren't even asked the racism question at all. So that's my statement.
Oh Lord. Okay, wait. I have to breathe deep because having been a black woman in office,
Pastor Litesa has the floor.
there are oh my Lord. I'm glad that she was asked the question, but I echo what you just said about it having to come from the other black female. That's typically how the media likes to kind of portray it. It likes to be able to see two people of color kind of going at it, sort of, right? I think it's also important to express the fact that typically if you are a candidate or an elected official of color, already the minority, and then if you happen to be a woman, then you're the minority of the minority. You are expected to act in such a way that is so consistent with the status quo that you don't tick people off. You're already seen as someone who can't garner the votes of the majority, whether it is white or men. And so you do operate in a way that you think is going to help garner the vote. Now, if you are a person of conscience, that will weigh on you so much that either you got to get the hell out or you get to the point in your career where you have to have a reckoning. And I think that's where Senator Harris is. She's going to, people are going to make you answer to towing the line and going with the status quo and doing what you thought was necessary so you could be in the room. And she even said that last night, that I thought that I could change the system by being inside of it. Well, you can't get inside if you don't play a certain level of the game. And that is a true, like, double-edged sword and catch-22 for minority candidates. You've got to be palatable enough for people to be willing to vote for you. You have to be kind of careful, even if what you put out, even if your agenda and your actions and everything that you're working toward is specific to your own community, you almost have to say it in a way that people don't pay that much attention to it, because if they think for a moment you're doing something special for the black community, where it might be just about equity, right? Being intentional to dismantle something and build it up and get toward equity and get toward justice, if people think that, you will never get it done. And that's just the absolute truth. And so it was very, it was hard for me to watch. I felt really emotional about that particular question, and being someone who took some really hard votes, and actually being someone who said I wasn't going to take certain votes because there's no way I'm locking up more black men, or there's no way I'm doing something that I know is going to hurt my community. And you can tell me that's going to hurt me in my district, but then guess what? They'll vote for me or they won't. So I really completely felt Senator Harris in that moment.
Well, we're seeing this debate happening in real time in the city of Chicago. Let's just move away from the debate for one moment, because following up what you said, Litesa, we're seeing this debate happen in real time in this ongoing dispute, if you will, between Tony Preckwinkle and Lori Lightfoot over bail and bond, and what's the reason why there's shootings in Chicago. And Lori Lightfoot blames it on, Mayor Lori Lightfoot blames it on judges who let the people out of prison or jail with a low bond, on an I bond or what have you, or just put the little bracket on their leg so they're supposedly being monitored. And she says that it's the fault of the judges. And Tony Preckwinkle has countered by saying that's an unfair criticism, that statistics show that the people who commit these crimes are not repeat offenders, and so you're just creating a boogeyman where none exists. And the real problem is that you don't have enough detectives to solve the crimes so that people feel that there's an accountability when a black person is killed by usually another black person.
And that's exactly when I just mentioned bills that I said I wasn't going to vote for. I specifically did not vote for the Rahm Emanuel, Eddie Jackson-backed bill for supposed repeat gun offenders. If you're not actually arresting people and bringing them to justice in the first place, you're never going to get to the point where they're sentenced anyway. So you need to get out there and figure out how to solve these crimes. And this fallacy, psychology will tell you, greater punishment is not necessarily a deterrent. I mean, there is a whole freaking line of research in psychology that's all about behavior and punishment. And I wish that someone would read it and then make public policy based upon it. Because saying that you're going to go to jail longer, people aren't worried about that because they also know they're not going to get caught any damn way.
Yeah, and I think that, and Litesa said that so beautifully, and I think that is something that I think there isn't enough appreciation about, the tension of being specifically a woman of color, a black woman in office, and having to just even be in the room. And again, go back to someone like a Joe Biden, who frankly, you can't. It's almost laughable to think a little bit like that. Some of these folks are on the same stage together, and that they're sort of being looked at as if like nothing kept them from getting to that point. I mean, Julian Castro. I mean, some of the stories that these folks are telling about how they grew up and things that they had to overcome. These are powerful stories, and it's like you look at someone like Joe Biden, who had obviously some hardships, but nothing like what Julian Castro or Kamala Harris or Cory Booker went through. And there's this part of me that's like, I don't think if the Democrats, who are supposed to be on our side, don't get that, how do you expect people who are just trying to live their lives, who are just trying to navigate the world, trying to get their health care, trying to get to and from work, spend the 3 hours it takes to watch one of these debates and be engaged, and then 8 years later realize nothing has changed.
Yeah.
So I mean, like that to me is like there's so much of a disconnect. Unfortunately, and every time I come on your show, I do this too. It's a media critique,
Yeah.
which is you don't have people who remember what that was like, because George Stephanopoulos is not making $15 an hour. Let's face it, he's probably making $15 million a year, if not more. So you have a complete disconnect for what ordinary people go through, and then you add the layer of gender and race and class, and you're talking to a completely different audience.
And I'll just say this about Kamala Harris's position on these on her law and order background as Attorney General. I can make the argument that it will be helpful in a general election to go up against Donald Trump and say, I was tough on crime. Traditionally, that's how Democrats go. When they get into the general election, they move right. They move to the center. And so one could make the argument that what is a vulnerability in a Democratic primary where the left is the deciding factor would be a benefit in a general election where you have to appeal to a wide range of people. One can make that argument. In fact, that was the reason that Bill Clinton gave for being Bill Clinton and selling out every value he had from his days in the 60s.
And who pushed him to the right? Rahm Emanuel.
Okay, time out. Wait, you got that wrong. Now, you got the tail wagging the dog. Billy told Rahm everything that Rahm knows, and Rahm just can't do it as good as Billy. He's not as smooth. Rahm is not. That's the problem.
Those memos. But I'm just.
He was just telling boss what he wanted to hear in those memos.
But here's the thing. Let's be clear that this is not 1992.
That is correct.
We are in a very different conversation. Has the country changed completely such that everybody is going to be on board with sort of restorative justice or expungements of cannabis convictions or what have you? I think there's a lot of education that's happened in the last, 20 some odd years. But let's be clear, we're almost 30 years. But yeah, I mean, that's something that I think it's how you frame it. In the case of Kamala Harris's record, I think she didn't seem, which I think is kind of a little surprising, is she didn't seem ready to respond. Anytime her records come up, she doesn't really respond to it directly. So that's a tactic. So I think it's her team has to look at, because she never really responds. I wish there was a candidate out there who said, I made a mistake.
But I
could have done. But you know what I mean?
Respond. I wonder if that is the tactic, to Ben's point, to not go on the record and pigeonhole yourself in such a way that if you make it to the general, you can't then stand on that and say, you know, I was doing my job as a prosecutor. I was doing my job as the attorney general.
Yeah.
So I wonder if that's
that's
needle.
exactly what I was saying. Yeah.
There's a needle to thread. I think because but here's the question though, and this is like, I guess, a fundamental question for the Democrats in general and progressives also, is that what is this the message that's in the Democratic primary, one that will not play? Are issues like criminal justice, are these things that will not play to a national audience? And are there ways to do it? Like, are there ways to have that conversation? Like, if you talk about expungements of cannabis convictions or things like there's got to be ways to do that.
Well, this is, you know, one thing that I was disappointed about when they talked about education. I think one person did bring up everyone being able to have access again to the Pell Grant. But you know, people talk about criminal justice reform, talk about the failed war on drugs, but don't talk about the fact that the number of black men who were charged with possession, and then now if they would like to return to college, they can't receive federal aid for it because you've got to say, oh, I had this drug conviction. We tried to make some efforts or move away from that in the state of Illinois. That is an uphill battle. So people aren't being even honest about the things that have gotten us into certain situations. And again, they say they're the party that, you know, is for this and for that. And then the final point I'll make about that is, you know, when we were talking about how Kamala or how anyone actually kind of threads that needle, we need to focus, I think, and this is where I think Bernie gets the traction, when you strip away race from those same issues. And again, I'm going to sound bad if someone takes this out of context, and you focus on the economic piece of that, then you have the ability to cut across geography and other demographics to be able to say that this is an issue that we all should care about. So if you're talking about bail reform, well, of course, poor people, black, white, or Hispanic, are going to be experiencing these issues. When you talk about the disproportionate amount of people who, you know, have felony convictions for certain things, yes, it is hugely disproportionate to African American communities. It's also disproportionate to people living in poverty. So when you start to zero in on the economic piece, I think that's how you make it a broader message for everyone.
Well, here's how it all kind of blends together. And again, we're a little off the debate. Sameena knows this. Litesa, I haven't shared this with you. I have a mini obsession right now with Dave Chappelle's latest comedy special. I've seen it twice.
Awesome. I need to watch it again.
And I've watched it twice. Probably watch it a third time, but one riff he does. Sameena has not seen it, so
you need to have me back on so we can talk about that.
But one riff he goes on that I think is apropos to this is when he goes on this riff about how he lives in Ohio and he's suddenly being confronted by white people who are heroin addicts, and the attitude, the different attitude that society has for white heroin addicts as opposed to black crack addicts in the 80s. And it's pretty... I think it's a pretty on-target bit that Chappelle is doing. That I got some problems with this Michael Jackson stuff. We'll leave that to the side. Yeah. But I think that there's a greater sympathy. People, I don't even know if they realize it, but when you when America confronts a white addict, there's sympathy. When America confronts a black addict, get yourself together. You're going to jail, and that's where you belong because you were. You know, I see that. I see that all the time. Constantly. And Kamala Harris is dealing with this as a black woman and an attorney general in a way that Joe Biden, Donald Trump will never have to deal with it.
Absolutely. But what you just talked about is also, there's a whole line of psychological research on that as well, that people show more empathy within group. If they can identify with that person in any way, there's going to be more expression of empathy toward that person. So I think that was what Chappelle was getting at when he talked about the black crack addicts, right? And he's like, well, I feel the same way that about the people who I saw, but no one said, come help them, right?
Yeah.
And now that I see this crisis happening I'm going to treat you the same way that you treated my community. I don't care that much. And that really is rooted in just, it's an evolutionary thing and it's a psychological thing, and people definitely have more empathy within group.
All right, let's move on to Andrew Yang. And in many ways, I'm perplexed by his candidacy. Not quite sure what he's getting at with his candidacy, and it seems like every debate he says something that's so bizarre and so borderline offensive. So he has this thing, he's done it twice now, did it in the last debate, did it in this debate, where he says something self-effacing about being Asian, and then makes this like gross generalization. So this debate, I think it was, I'm Asian, so I know a lot of doctors. Like, what the hell? That's like a black guy. I'm black. I know a lot of basketball. You could imagine Dave Chappelle as a joke doing it. You know what I'm saying? And then in the last one, I'm Asian, so I'm good at math. Man, I know a lot of Asians who suck at math. You know what I'm saying? And I just don't get, like, what is that all about? And does he think that that works? That makes him more lovable or likable? I'm not feeling this one, Sameena.
He's really, I mean, back to your Chappelle comment, I'm sure, well, that's not a new comment from Chappelle, and we could go on about how Chappelle's not at the top of his game. I'm sure somebody else came up with that concept, the crack epidemic versus the opioid epidemic, way before he did. But on Andrew Yang, I think Andrew Yang, there's so many things that are wrong with his candidacy, but he really is digging into the model minority myth, which is fundamentally rooted in anti-blackness. Let's be clear. Mm-hmm. It is a tactic. It is a whole way of thinking that is about, we're a minority, but we're not like those people. And it's just... I've seen him make a couple of statements on race and on just sort of the left versus right and just completely miss the mark. And he just doesn't have a really strong sense of, I mean, obviously he's talking to people and he's got the Yang gang that that I think some people have described them as I think coming from is it 4chan or 8chan? I can't keep track with all these online portals, but, that they're, they have a kind of a bro-y white supremacist strain. And so he's just leaning into racial stereotypes that frankly aren't helpful. And a lot of Asians, being an Asian Indian myself and being in a lot of Pan-Asian communities, we're just like scratching our heads. What are you talking about? You're not helping us. This is not helping us. I thought it was also interesting, though, at the debate last night when the question of China came up, he got that question first. Right. So in some ways, the moderators were playing that game too. Like, let's ask him. Let's ask the Asian guy about China. So
yeah. Are you perplexed by Andrew Yang as well?
Well, I was absolutely going to bring up the model minority, the myth of that, and how that really is rooted in white supremacy, as well as you mentioned, anti-blackness or anti any group that's been here and has been perceived as not doing as well as they could have or should have if they worked harder, if they did X, Y, or Z, and acted more like this particular group, they could be further along. And so, yeah, I do think that he plays completely into that. And it makes me cringe. Yeah. Completely makes me cringe.
And then the other thing he did, which I had a little fun with at the start of a regular show today, he just stole it right out of Willie Wilson. I'm going to give you guys money. I like Willie's approach better. Willie just said, come to this place, I'll give you the cash. Andrew Yang, you got to go into his computer thing, enter his computer, give him all your information. He's slick. He's like Zuckerberg. He's taking stuff from you before he gives it to you. Yeah. So but it's, what else is it? What's the difference?
He's trying to grow his list, man.
He's trying to grow his list.
Hard to grow a list.
Well, that's a unique. How come Pritzker didn't think of that? He's got more money than Andrew Yang. Anyway, all right. Because that's a whole other race. But Andrew Yang, I'm not feeling his campaign in any way at this moment, and I'm still perplexed as to how he was able to make that on the stage. Yeah. I mean, they made fun of Marianne Williamson.
That's what I'm saying. I think he has a very active online presence. He's got those folks that are really, kind of, he's activated. He started running actually a long time ago, which is, I mean, if you think about it, he's just been out there longer talking about this and has had a consistent message. So whether I agree with him or not, he's been consistently, and he's always bringing up his freedom dividend. And so to a subset of the population that is intrigued by UBI, he has such a clear message that is memorable. And that is something that actually, even though I don't agree with him, and I don't necessarily think that UBI is going to be the panacea, especially with his ideology that is probably going to be cutting social programs to give UBI, it's something that for the other candidates, the front runners, to think about. Simplifying their
I'm
message.
surprised that they're not, because much of it is rooted in, the war or the Poor People's Campaign and all the work that went into the latter part of Dr. King's life. So it's interesting that no one else has latched on to UBI in any way, even a Sanders or a Warren.
UBI stands for
Universal Basic
Income.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Yeah, thank you, Robert Mueller. All right, really appreciate that. Dee, could you play that tape that we did from 2010?
Oh, yeah, sure. Let me grab it. Let me grab my fifth arm and take care of that.
Could you do that Litesa Wallace interview from 2017 where she first came on my show?
Pre you getting fired.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, right. That
Okay, cool.
On that other station?
Yeah, I forget the name of it.
Yeah.
WC, get out of
Something.
here.
Yeah.
Anyway, really appreciate the work that the doctor does. But all right, so we pretty much come to the end of this. I'll just ask as a final question, having seen, you guys have seen now 4 debates.
Yeah, 3.
We'll start with you, Sameena. Go to you, Litesa. Close it down. Who are you leaning for, or have you changed your mind, or you have 3 candidates? Give 3 candidates instead of just one.
So if I had to say the 3 candidates that... What is happening? I actually went... music aside, but I'm impressed that you were able to cue it up. That's really, I'm impressed.
Yeah.
I'm sorry I'm ruining the moment. Sorry to ruin the moment.
Candidates be?
My 3 candidates. My 3 candidates. Should I do an impression of each one? I could try.
Yeah.
I could try. I could try.
Each candidate?
Each candidate.
My first candidate is Bernie Sanders.
Yeah, right.
That's great.
My second candidate is Elizabeth Warren.
Yeah.
I think she always has this look, and if you're watching the video. And the last one is you old ass Julian Castro.
She likes.
Well, okay, let's be clear.
Ageist.
He could be very he could be way better on sort of the economic progressivism, but his immigration plan is excellent.
Well, not only that, he was in the first debate. I gave him so much credit and shout out because he went right at the specific clause in the immigration law that was forcing people to get arrested and be treated like criminals. So I give him a shout out for that.
Yeah.
I was going to say, let's do like a little one word here because there's some candidates we kind of left out here.
Okay.
What about Amy Klobuchar?
Just one word.
Like as flat as her beer. I don't know. I just not excited about her. Not excited.
Not excited.
Neighbor.
Neighbor. Mean like she's like your neighbor?
Yeah, I think she'd be like someone who lives on the block from me.
Oh no!
That's great. All right. What about? Did we talk about Beto?
No, we haven't.
really.
Beto's got any love. Beto with the guns. You got to give him credit for that. Look, Litesa.
I just
not feeling it.
You know what? He here. It's going back to what we were talking about earlier. Beto gets the credit for talking about racism and gun violence. That specifically on racism.
Yeah.
That black people like Colin Kaepernick, took a knee, but Beto gets his video goes viral, and he's being told to run for president, and Colin Kaepernick doesn't have a job. So I'm just saying.
What's your
a word?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know.
I'm bad.
What is it?
Here's the word.
AR-15.
That's what you should be running for. Senator in
well,
Texas.
That's probably what he'll run for next.
Or who'd be the VP?
What about Cory Booker?
Ooh, we haven't talked about CB.
He had some good lines. I like the one. What did he say? Don't let purity be the altar that progression, or that progress is sacrificed on, or something like that. I was like, ooh, that's a good one. Yeah. He, better than anyone, I think, answered the education question. tying it all together, that it's not just about the classroom and teacher pay, but what is the environment that the child is living in? What are some of the, in terms of lead and, awful toxins in the air and asthma and all these things. He didn't bring up asthma specifically, but he connected the dots, of environmental justice, educational outcomes, communities. I think he answered that question far better than anybody else on the stage.
And he remembered veterans, and that nobody else did that.
Yes,
and,
he did.
Letesa, I have a message to give to you from the guest. The 3 o'clock hour was a state senator now, not state representative anymore, Rob Martwick. He said to say hello. Aww. He's really drinking the
Cory Booker Kool-Aid.
I mean, he was dousing it. He goes, Ben, Cory Booker's the guy.
I'm like, hey, keep that Kool-Aid away from me.
And I got to tell you, I was drinking the Kamala Kool-Aid about 2 weeks ago, but he is really drinking that Cory. I'm not really feeling Cory.
And I think there's one more candidate that we haven't really mentioned that much. I know why you haven't been. Mayor Pete.
Mayo Pete, as Black Twitter calls him. Mayo.
Yeah.
So I think Castro got him real good, reminding him what a primary is.
Yeah.
He had a few good lines. I mean, he always has. He's well spoken. I just don't know what he's saying. That the Medicare for all who want it. Come on, man.
His closing, his sharing of resilience and any potential career setbacks. I think that was.
Well, this is a question I said I was going to ask you, and so I'm going to ask you right now. When they asked, what resilience means to you, or whatever the question was at the end, and they all got to give personal stories. He talked about coming out and letting the whole world know that he was gay. So it led to the following exchange between me and many of my friends, and that is this question: who will get elected president first, a gay white man or a woman of any color? Sameena?
I think a gay white man.
Litesa?
Gay white man.
Okay, just threw that out there. Litesa, you didn't get to name your 3 favorite candidates at the moment.
Oh,
yeah, not endorsing anyone, just the 3 that you like.
Yeah. People have been really trying to figure this out for weeks since someone I know endorsed someone. It's like, what does Litesa think? It's like, oh, you haven't thought about me until he said something. Sanders, Warren, and then I have like a top 4, and then it would be Harris and Booker. And I know that those are extremes on the political spectrum, but sometimes you got to root for the team, or as Issa Rae says, I'm rooting for everyone black.
Well, I have to go with, I'm really feeling that Bernie today. Bernie, Elizabeth Warren, and I still haven't quit on Kamala. All right? I'm still drinking. Hold on.
See, it's funny because I didn't go for my tribe. I mean, Kamala is Indian, half Indian, and Yang is Asian, but I'm not feeling it.
Come on, Yang is such a joke.
Yeah, but there are people who support him. There are people who are very they want to see an Asian president. And like I said, there's things I like about Kamala. I just wasn't feeling it with her last night. I think she showed a lot of.
I like Kamala, man. I'll be honest with you.
She showed a lot of warmth last night, which I thought was actually really refreshing from all the candidates. A lot of the candidates seemed really like.
She seemed real.
Yeah, she was actually really warm and
rehearsed, and
she was like. It's funny because Meghan McCain, who's useless on most days, she's like, I couldn't stand all the rehearsed lines from Kamala Harris. I'm like, I thought Kamala seemed more loose and like just like. With the exception of the Lindsay Davis question, I thought she felt more natural.
Well, I'm heading into Litesa country on that question. I think she's holding back to use that as a calling card should she be the presidential candidate and running against Donald. I threw more people in jail than you ever threw into jail or something like that. Who knows where we're going?
I kept us safe,
Or we could go the other way. Imagine this: if it's Kamala versus Donald John Trump. Think of this. Where Donald John Trump is coming at it from the left on criminal charges. I'm the one who passed this.
He will, because Booker brought it up last night as well.
Why, what a bogus, that's what I love.
Booker did bring that up last night.
Come on, Booker.
He will.
See, Booker sometimes goes in that direction.
A radical love.
No, the whole thing where like we can work together, and it's such a bogus.
It's this concept. It's the radical love concept.
Yeah, well, it's just this bogus thing. I haven't seen a Republican working with a Democrat on the national level since the 90s, and it didn't work out so well then. And it didn't even work in the 90s. They started to impeach Clinton as soon as they could.
Yep.
Yeah.
Anyway, we were probably taking too much time.
They got welfare reform, and they got.
That's why I'm saying it didn't work out so well.
What's the other bill? The
crime bill.
The crime bill.
Yeah,
that's what I mean. Yeah.
It didn't work out for us. It worked out for them.
when Democrats act like Republicans, that's when they call it a compromise. I'm still waiting for a Republican to come to the left on anything, and it's not going to happen. Litesa Wallace, it's a blast having you back. It's been too long.
Yes, so long. Thank you for having me.
Yes,
I'm so focused on the boys that this was awesome to be here today.
Well, I know you came a long distance. I really appreciate you coming down to the studio. I mean that. And as you're always one of my favorite guests, as you know, and of course, the great Sameena Mustafa. Not that long a schlep for you to come in here, right?
Yeah.
And so what we're going to do, Sameena, we're going to have you drag you. We're going to make you watch that Dave Chappelle comedy special.
Yes.
She's
and
trashing
we could
Chappelle.
have a reunion.
Yes.
And talk the Chappelle show.
Well, why don't we just have a reunion?
Chappelle.
We just have a reunion.
We could, we could do something really wild and crazy.
Make Dennis work.
No. We could do a live watching of the show and do like live commentary. It's an idea.
Wait, is there copyright issues that you have to deal with?
I don't know.
We all go online.
I don't know.
Ramona Hussein just
Watch
Ramona Hussein. All right. Well,
speaking of copyright issues.
Yeah, we're live, by the way. Just come on and say hi to the camera. Anybody drops just walks on in.
The janitor.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
I don't know if the copyright issues are cool. We'll do that. It'll be fun to do it. And I've got a friend or two who've also expressed an interest. Everybody wants to talk about that Dave Chappelle thing.
What if we were at home? We put on our individual Netflix. We do a watch party on Facebook. And we could do it.
Everybody looks at Dennis. Can you do that?
I think so. I think we can make that happen. Get the bong out. That'd be crazy.
Oh my God.
Get the bong out.
I don't think till January.
You're gonna have a lot of hard time. You're gonna have a hard time pulling up those clips.
January. Letesa Wallace, ever the state representative, pointing out that it's not technically legal until January.
Don't want anyone getting in trouble.
Yeah, I want to get anyone in trouble, and you would not want to be advocating breaking the law. Letesa Wallace, Sameena Mustafa, the Dr. D. Great job, everybody. This has been a Ben Joravsky bonus special. Take care.
This Ben Joravsky, Benny J bonus interview was brought to you in part by the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local 126 in District 8, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 9, the International Union of Operating Engineers, Local 150, and of course, our good friends at the Chicago Federation of Labor.